Welcome to Thriver TV, the place to break free from narcissistic abuse with quantum tools and understandings. And today's Thriver TV episode is from beautiful Hoi An in Vietnam. So I just want to show you a little scene outside my window. So let's just have a look and I can show you. All right, it's just gorgeous, just beautiful. But the thing is, I can't put that scenery in the background because I'm completely black, I'm completely dark. So, you know, such is the joys of filming. So I can't do that, but that's the beautiful scenery I'm looking at right at this point. So today's episode, we don't have Zach, and I'm so sorry, but Zach did assure me and he wanted me to pass on to you that he is going to do a Thriver TV episode, but he wants to prepare. He wants to really give it his best shot. So throwing him on the spot didn't work, but please be reassured he is going to show up in the future, so it's all good. And I just want to address last week's episode and Tiggy and the water gurney. And, you know, a lot of people, there was a flow of responses, a barrage really, that came through to my support team, also some of my forums, comments on Thriver TV. And there was lots of suggestions, unsolicited advice really. And within these suggestions, there was all sorts of things ranging from pebbles in the pot plant, which was a really good idea actually, all through to consulting feline behavioural specialists. And what really kind of surprised me was that people took the water gurney thing literally, which I found really interesting because, you know, sort of logically, I've just, you know, done up a place and furnished it. And if I was to use a water gurney inside, well, I can just imagine I'd be blowing up my pot plant. I'd be taking plaster off my walls, but thank God my cat doesn't pee in the pot plant anymore. Really, people? Really? You didn't get that that was a gag? The people that didn't? You know, clearly high pressure water hoses, aka gurneys, live in garages and they're actually used outside. So I'm going to get to this point a little bit later in regard to when we're being codependent and when we're actually trying to change people's behavior on the outside of us to make us feel better on the inside. It actually doesn't work, and there was a few people within the community that were playing that out in regard to the whole Tiggy thing. Rest assured, Tiggy's fine. I don't do things to scare him. There's now pellets as deterrents in the pot plant and it has been working beautifully. It's all good. All right, so on to today's show. I want to share with you the things that I most learned about narcissistic abuse, and at the end of this presentation I want to share with you the biggest thing, but I'll get to that. So what I learned, the first thing I learned, the initial thing that I learned was that people aren't actually treating us in accordance to how we treat them. We've all been taught, excuse me, I'm busy, come back later, thank you. See, authenticity, it's all going on in Thriver TV. So I learned that the thing was, we were all taught to believe that people are going to treat us in accordance to the way we treat them. It's a false premise, because what I deeply discovered is that people were treating me in relation to how I was feeling about myself, my beliefs about myself, and how I treated myself. And in regard to narcissistic abuse, when I started healing, the discoveries were huge and they came one after the other. And initially these discoveries were about the ways that I treated myself, which were incredibly abysmal. And because I was unconscious and that had been always the way I was, it was my normal, I didn't know I was doing it, but the ways I spoke to myself, the ways that I demanded more and more perfectionism, the ways that I was so conditionally loving to myself. Melanie, I will like you if you lose 5 pounds. Melanie, I will like you if you have a better result in this thing that you're doing. Melanie, I will like you if you get a better home. Melanie, I will like you if you have a better car. Melanie, I will like you if you have better friends. Melanie, I will like you if you have a better hairstyle. All these things that all these conditions that I continually put on myself, and it didn't matter which condition I would fulfill, there would always be a new condition because it was a bottomless pit. And I also realized that this relentless way that I was always making the hoops higher to jump through, to like myself, I certainly didn't love myself. That was way too far a stretch. Were exactly identical to the insane conditions that the narcissist was always granting me, which was no matter what I did or how I did it, it was never good enough. The goal posts would be moved. There'd be a new condition I'd have to fulfill because he was a bottomless pit. Just as I could never appease myself, I could never appease him. He was reflecting the identical stuff back to me. I also realized that I realized deeply that what was going on with him was I was always accusing him of, you don't know me. Why are you making that crazy accusation against me? Why are you telling me that that I'm a bad person, that I'm evil, that I'm all the things that he was doing, he was saying I was doing. But what I would do is I'd say, well, you don't know me. Why do you accuse me of these things? Why do you tell me I'm this horrible bad person? Why are you even with me? You don't know me. You don't even know who I am. But the truth was, who didn't know who I was? I wasn't self-partnered. I'd never spent time deeply getting to know me, to self-soothe me, to support me, to ask me how I was feeling, to check in with me about what I needed and what wasn't right for me. I wasn't doing any of those things. So who really didn't know me? I didn't know me. And that's exactly what he was reflecting back to me relentlessly. So when we start getting into a thriver orientation, we stop thinking about what happened to me, which means that all of our focus is on the narcissist. Because when all of our focus is on the narcissist, we have hit powerless. We have no power to control, change, or develop anything that isn't us. And the more that we try to control people and situations that aren't ourselves, the more we end up being controlled by them, which is exactly that incidence that was happening with Tiggy when people were saying, well, Melanie, if you do this and that and you don't do this and that, well, I'm going to feel better. No, and that's never worked. That's never been the paradigm, a true paradigm of how I can feel better and whole and at peace is by changing what somebody else is or isn't doing. That's codependency and it doesn't work. So what would be more appropriate there is, well, what's triggering me? What's setting me off? Why am I feeling this cortisol and adrenaline? And if I address that, well, then I can come out of unconsciousness, which is our drunkenness. When we're in cortisol and adrenaline, we become quite unintelligent. And it's very easy to miss the whole fact that a water gurney inside really isn't a logical thing that's going to happen. It's just not. And when we get out of our cortisol and our adrenaline and we do the work inside, we show up as solid and sane and together, and then we can see things very clearly. And if they're still not clear, then what we can do is we can check in, and you could ask and you could say, you know, Melanie, was that a gag or was that for real? No, that sort of stuff. And it's the same with us, that when we take responsibility, we start to understand that we're going to come out of victim consciousness at looking at what is happening to us, and we're going to start getting very deeply interested about why this is happening to us. And that's exactly what all of my series, Clearing Our Susceptibility to Narcissus, is all about. The reason that I created all of those episodes is because this is exactly what I used to do, ranging all the way from having very poor boundary function, being terrified to speak up, being terrified of losing approval, love, security, and survival by upsetting somebody else. So I had terrible boundaries. I was always seeking approval from the outside in order to feel valuable and loved and whole and healthy, rather than realizing that that was all to do between me and me. So every episode I've done, I did all of those things, and there's going to be more episodes coming through about our susceptibility to narcissists. And this isn't about blaming ourselves, and this is the victim consciousness, where it can be very much about, well, don't tell me I'm at fault and I'm to blame. Fault and blame are both false premises. It's not what it's about. What it is about is the acknowledgement that there is something within my emotional composition that's not working for me. There's something within my level of traumas inside me that are unresolved, and my belief systems that aren't serving me, that I picked up from childhood or I got through my genetic programming, that isn't working for me. Because the thriver orientation, and this is what I realized when I realized all the things that I was learning about narcissistic abuse and about myself, was this was not about blaming me. This was about having a fascination and understanding a deeper, wider truth in life, is that life, nature, creation, God, no matter what you want to call it, is efforting for our highest and greatest good always. It is co-partnered with us, and it is deeply interested in our evolution and us being freed to our highest and best self. That's always life, God, creation, nature's intention for us, is very, very loving. So what happens is, with life and the characters in our life, in the screenplay of our life, they're doing one or two things. They're either reflecting to us where our emotional composition isn't aligned with us. So, these are the things in our life that feel like a struggle, they feel difficult, they feel problematic and painful and even traumatic. Or life is reflecting back to us where our emotional composition, which is our inner emotional health on those topics, and our belief systems, when they are aligned, that's when the things in our life have an ease and a flow and a grace, and they just work for us and they feel really good. So they're the only two combinations that we're going to be receiving, to varying degrees on the spectrum. And when we come out of the trance, when we come out of unconsciousness, we start to wake up, and rather than saying life is happening to me, we deeply understand that life is happening for me. It's my signal, it's my message to be able to go inside, to self-partner, to find those things and those parts of me that hurt, that aren't aligned with my highest and my truest self, to be able to pick them up, embrace them, claim them, rather than self-avoiding. I'm going to self-partner, and I'm going to heal those parts of myself and release them and up-level them to make space for a higher, more organic, true self that is emotionally aligned, that has an emotional composition that matches what I want and what life and God and creation and nature wants for me, which is my highest and best self. And that, in a nutshell, is the process of personal evolution. But if we're going to be stuck in that victim consciousness of this had nothing to do with me, this is all to do with narcissists and abusers and they should be held accountable, well then we're not going to take personal responsibility. We're not going to heal. We're not going to be freed of our wounds and the trauma. We're not going to leave abuse programs behind, and we're not going to be into a life that is a trajectory that has nothing to do with narcissists. We're going to be stuck and enmeshed and embedded in it. Now, I did have some notes because normally when I'm working at home, you know, creating these episodes, I have my whiteboard with me, and I just really wanted to make sure that I didn't miss any points here, because there is some really, really, you know, important points that I want to share with you today. So I've already talked about that stuff. That's fine. Yeah. So it really is a horrible price that victims can pay. It's a terrible price when the insistence on the victim model and staying stuck in it is where they want to be. And it's really interesting and quite crazy that, and I used to think it, that we can think that if we are hanging on to, you know, you were bad, you were evil, you were wrong, you need to be held accountable. We think that narcissists will be held accountable and they're going to pay for what they did, but we stay sick and twisted and hurt and diminished, and it just validates for the narcissist that he or she was right, because we end up the sick, diminished one that ends up punished and remains in living a punished, horrible life. So that just validates them. It really does. You know, they were right. It was us that was demented and wrong and sick all along. However, you know, when we heal and we up level and we move on to a trajectory that leaves abuse and the narcissist behind, well, then they stay sick and stuck in the unconsciousness they're in, and we move on to a whole new, better life. And that is the thriver orientation. And the interesting thing is, narcissists are usually, if they're going to be held accountable, they're held accountable when we've moved on and we've got in our power. And I've done a lot of thriver stories about people that have won in court and custody cases, and narcissists have been held accountable. People that are thrivers in their power. Never the victimized version. The victimized version, that just, it doesn't come about. As much as people want it and scream out for it and demand it, and in fact, the more they do that, the less it happens, because that's the quantum law of conditional living. When your life and your state is based on an outer condition, you're not going to get that condition fulfilled. You have to become the inner state and that alignment, then the rest of life will follow you. And it's unconditional. You don't actually need it to. It's just a cherry on your cake. So that's that stuff. So I just want to make sure I've covered off before I get to the biggest thing that I really want to share with you, that is just so important. It really is. Okay, there is one other point. What I realized about myself in regard to narcissistic abuse was this was actually never about the narcissist. This was always about myself. The narcissist was simply a symptom that showed up on my disconnected trajectory to show me as an outer reflection of what was really going on the inside. And what this had always been about was my relationship with myself, about getting that right, about getting that whole, about becoming a source of love, approval, survival, and security to myself authentically, so that I could show up as an authentic, true self, regardless of what any other specific people were or weren't doing. And that was the true freedom, to be able to have this thriver life that I have. So let's get to the biggest thing, I think it is the biggest thing, and it's part of the advanced development of thriving. The huge thing for me was compassion. First of all, it was compassion for myself. It was about learning to love and accept the parts of me that I didn't like, and to be able to self-partner with those parts in order to heal them and evolve them and release me from myself, the parts of me that weren't working. That took enormous compassion, because we can never blame, shame, criticize, attack and pummel ourselves back to health. That's what I've been trying to do my entire life, and that hadn't worked. It was my normal. I didn't know any other way to be. And then, of course, I ended up getting somebody in my life that just did more of it in such a way I couldn't ignore it anymore. So compassion was huge. It was also getting out of the judgment and the blame of narcissists, because originally as a victim, 100% I believed narcissists were evil, they were wrong, they were bad. And I hadn't realized that my judgment was actually keeping me separated from my own love and healing. And that's truth. Every time we are judging something, we are keeping ourselves separated from our own love and healing. And all it was doing was keeping the pain going in my life, the victimization, and setting me up to receive more of it. I really want to share this image and this heart understanding with you. I want you to imagine that you're seeing a 3-year-old child on a movie screen that is being engulfed and emotionally abused significantly by either a narcissistic parent or a victimized codependent parent who is projecting their own wounds and pain onto this child, and no matter what this child does, it's never good enough. Now, I want you to imagine going into the inner landscape of this child, and this child at some point emotionally decides that who I am, the real me, is getting too damaged, can never have their needs met, and is insufficient. So the child makes an unconscious emotional decision to submerge and kill off that true self and create a fictitious character in its place to emotionally be able to exist. And from that point onwards, this child has become a pathological self, is now a maladapting false self, trying to source love, approval, security and survival through non-authentic ways and means, through manipulation or acting out, or pretending to be somebody that he or she isn't or doesn't feel like. So this child has become a narcissist. And then if you were to fast forward 25 years and you would see the way that this person behaves in outrageous, insane, pathological ways, would you blame them? Would you call them evil and bad and wrong? I hope not. Because a deeper, wider understanding that we all need to know is that both narcissists and codependents are all in the same game. We're all in the same game of trying to survive with faulty belief systems, with internalized traumas, with DNA programming that doesn't serve us, from a legacy of parents that didn't understand and had no training to know that a child's subconscious is very precarious and vulnerable and can be programmed for good or bad profoundly, very easily, because our parents were trying to survive their own wounds and do the best they could with the emotional compositions they had. So we've been in this unconscious world that has been creating victims and narcissists who are both highly unconscious. But the difference is that somebody with MPD is never going to meet their traumatized inner wounds in order to take full responsibility for them, to heal them and up-level them to something healthier, whereas a victimized codependent can. And that is the profound difference between narcissists and codependents. That we as codependents have the ability to wake up out of the trance, to take 100% radical personal responsibility to heal our wounds and leave all of this far behind. Now, the narcissists in everybody's life, including my own, the two narcissists I had that smashed me to pieces. The reason I call them AIDS, angels in disguise, is because they did me a profound service. They brought to me from the outside the screaming evidence of my wounded inner malfunctioning DNA that was keeping me separated from my highest and best self. They brought it to my attention so profoundly that I could no longer go on in life with it as my normal. I was either going to dissolve or evolve. I was going to die or I was going to live. And thank goodness I chose to live by actually meeting those wounds, up-leveling them, healing them, and becoming free of myself. And I am so grateful to the narcissist in my life, as well as every unconscious abusive person in my life, even today, if one crosses my path and triggers me. It is the absolute ultimate opportunity and gift, because we mine our most precious gold from our deepest wounds. When the parts of us that were in trauma and survival get unleashed into creation, that is when we become a higher, better, more expansive self than we were ever able to do or able to be without having these parts of us triggered significantly. So I'm eternally grateful, and I have the most incredible compassion for narcissists in that they are not going to get out of their living hell if they have NPD. They're not going to meet themselves. They're not going to release themselves. And it doesn't matter what they receive from the outside. It doesn't matter how many millions, how many beautiful partners, how many cars, how many houses. Doesn't matter how much acclaim, how much prestige. Doesn't matter. All of those things are only temporary fixes that will never hold, that can never fill and feed a true self. We can't feed and fill our true self from the outside. It's an inside job. We can't get it through stuff. And narcissists can't get it through stuff. They're never going to get it through stuff. So, I feel for them. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to jump in there and I'm going to try and fix them and change them. That's what I used to do. Not at all. It's not my responsibility, and I have no power to do that. The only responsibility and power that I have is to up-level and heal myself, and then be that example in the world for others. That's it. And this is what I want for everybody, because when we free ourselves from ourselves and realize that these characters in our life, if they didn't turn up, somebody else would have had to. So if it wasn't the two narcissists in my life, would have had to have been somebody else to do an identical role. If I hadn't have had the other people in my life that have hurt me, then they would have needed to be replaced. If I hadn't have had the parents I did and the unconsciousness that they did at times, I would have needed parents to do it identically, because this was all a soul purpose. These were all soul contracts. This was meant to happen, to wake me up from unconsciousness to consciousness. And we can all do this. This is the gift. And when we all do this one person at a time, our world is going to transform beyond recognition. Our future generations are going to come out of the unconsciousness. They're going to wake up. They're going to heal. Our humanity can heal. And that's just so exciting. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode and it's made a lot of sense to you. And I'm really going to look forward to, your comments and interacting with you about this. And please remember to like, comment and share, because that really helps the Thriver mission get momentum so that we can heal our victimization and our unconsciousness. And well, that's it. That's it from me for this week. So keep smiling, keep healing, keep thriving, because there's nothing else to do. And I look forward to seeing you next week from Melbourne. Okay, lots of love. Bye-bye.